All right. Let's roll.
All right.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to January 2021, a new year. Hopefully 2020 is gone forever and, everything is onward and upward from here.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how true that is. We can hope. But, what a year. Anyone who's got, big positive memories, big achievements from 2020, throw them in the chat. Let us know, what's that milestone that you hit? What's that thing you never thought you'd do, but you pulled it off? What's coming in 2021? What are you really excited about? We want to hear all that stuff. And we want to keep that conversation going. So, we've got this Slack group that is fantastic, full of super smart people. It's been running for ages now. There's tons of knowledge in there.
Oh.
And the opportunity to really connect with the rest of the community. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. For this month, we are going to be hearing from Niall, who's going to be talking about CI/CD and his approaches, what he's learned. He's got a lot of experience in the space. He's someone who's always trying new things and trying to share what he learned. So really excited for that. We will throw to him in a moment. Next, what I want to cover is our sponsor, JFrog, has a conference coming up and the CFP is open. They want to hear your proposals. They want to hear your ideas for talks. So jump over to that CFP. I'll leave this up for a moment, but I can also copy and paste this link. Actually, Sebas, if you can grab this link from the slide and throw it in the chat for everyone to kind of copy and paste, that'd be awesome. But yeah, check it out. They run really good events. And, if you're looking to share what you've learned, if you're looking to present some ideas in 2021, one of my favorite ways to learn is to sign myself up for a talk. And then I force myself to figure it out by the time I have to give the presentation, right? It's a great way to push yourself to learning something new. So if there's something you're really passionate about, sign up. Write a proposal, and then you're going to be halfway there to crafting a presentation. And as always, I'm around to support you. I would love to see more of our community sharing ideas and sharing presentations beyond the Toronto community. So if there's anything that I can do to support, share my experiences, my tips and tricks, help you practice, help you craft an abstract or proposal, I would love to, so feel free to reach out to me. But I think it's really important. It's an amazing way to learn, and it's an amazing way to share what you've learned with the rest of the community. Give you heads up about what's coming. We've got Andrew here. He's going to be joining us next month to talk about Terraform. We've got service ownership coming. We also have performance feedback coming. So we've got lots of stuff coming in the next couple months. Sign up, make sure that your alerts are working, make sure that you've got all your heads up in order so that you find out about those and you RSVP because they're going to be great. And hopefully we see you there. But with that, I'm going to pass over to Niall and we can kick off a talk.
Cool. Sounds great. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
I'll just throw up the slide deck here and we can get started. Hopefully everyone hears me okay.
I can.
Sweet. Yeah, let me stop my share and then you can share your screen. We can hear you fine.
Cool. So my name's Niall. I'm a local, sometimes Python guy, sometimes systems person. I guess today's talk is a lot about sort of my experiences over the past year. And a lot of that was troubleshooting and working with a lot of different CI/CD pipelines and trying to make my life less painful. And a lot of today's talk is also a reaction to last month's talk, which was about a CI tool called EVERYTH. And a gentleman named Adam Bell kind of gave us a walkthrough of how that extends Docker files. and he had this great slide that showed like 100 commits of someone troubleshooting a pipeline, and each commit was like funnier than the last, like, oh my God, please work this time. I know you can do it kind of thing. The guy was like giving his CI/CD pipeline a pep talk. And I've just like, I've been totally there. I've been totally stuck there trying to get something like that to work. And a lot of this is sort of extracted from that pain, I guess. So just to kind of set a base for us to build upon. I know we all know what CI/CD is. I just wanted to kind of touch on pipelines as code really briefly. So this is not new. It's been around for a while, but the general concept is based a lot on what I just talked about. Pipelines are hard to troubleshoot. They're hard because they take a lot of time. They're time intensive, and pipelines as code kind of takes a crack at solving that by taking all the sort of complexity out of the pipeline, particularly conditional complexity, which is like really hard to test. And we turn that into sort of refactored, reusable modules that we can call every time we want to solve that common problem that comes up. So every time you want to lint your code base, you call the third-party PyLint plugin or the container that has that built in. We end up managing kind of simpler YAML documents that string these modules together, and we can check that into our code base, and we end up with something akin to infrastructure as code, where we've got a really simple document that describes our pipeline. The particulars of how the modules are built varies from sort of implementation. So you may get like GitHub Actions, containers if you're into Concourse, whatever. They all have their own they all have their own take on the same concept. So now that we've got that out of the way, I want to jump back to pretty much exactly 1 year ago. I was working with a local Python team here in Toronto. And we were Dockerizing their development environment, and we were kind of just going through that process of like tidying all those things together. And there were two kind of things that came to mind as we were going through that process. The first was sort of like about the barrier to entry for writing your sort of first line of code. And if we're being good DevOps citizens and we're putting like good sensible guardrails in place on our code base, we have a lot of things that we sort of need to cover off in this day and age. Linting and formatting, the team lead needs those to be able to do like, he's going to be reading pull requests all day long. He needs to be able to find what's going on. So he's probably going to be pretty opinionated on that. And we want that guy to be able to do his job. Testing, test discovery, those are sort of essentials that you need to get going. And then, the security side of things, we want to be sure that the packages we're using don't have CVEs. We want to be sure that we're not checking in, get secrets, that kind of thing. And there's solutions for all of these things. But that's sort of the doorman or the bouncer who's in front of you when you're trying to get there for your first commit. You've got to clear all those obstacles. So if you're sitting down, you want to write a package, you're going to have to put all this stuff in place for you to be able to start writing any sort of code. The second thing that kind of came to mind is sort of this idea of this process of solving these problems getting duplicated. And this doesn't always happen, but there's when you've got a separate platform or a separate team managing sort of like the pipeline side of things, there's a lot of potential for this. Even on a small dev team, you might have two people who independently set up the pipeline and independently set up the dev environment. There can be overlap there. And what I'm talking about is you build your pipeline, you're being a good DevOps citizen, you're following pipelines as code, you're buying into that methodology, you're not trying to re-implement any wheels. So what you're going to do is go out there and try and find a modular plugin that does what you need to do when you're stringing together your YAML document. So you get somebody who implements a linter in the dev environment and all the devs use it on their machine, and you get another linter that is installed in the pipeline as a plugin or perhaps as a GitHub action or something like that. This doesn't happen all the time, but the potential is there. So that duplication was present, and that was one of the first things that sort of irritated me and I wanted to kind of go after. So I kind of thought, okay, I know what I'll do. I'll do a little splicing here. I'll just cut out the CI portion of our YAML document where we invoke all these third-party modules. And what I'll do is I'll just invoke the dev environment, and that will get me to run the linter, the test suite, all the stuff that we like took all that time to set up. I'll just run it inside the CI/CD pipeline itself. And the tangential problem that this solved was environment splintering, where you can get into that. Well, it worked on my machine. Why isn't it working on your machine? You know, Docker's often leveraged to solve that problem. Well, here I was kind of like throwing that at the pipeline environment versus the local environment problem. So I came up with this like really simple solution where I just wrote some bash scripts. This is nothing fancy, but it did work to solve this duplication problem. Like I was able to cut out all that re-implemented third-party plugin stuff and just swap in the dev environment that we were already using every day for this. So it worked pretty well. There was no real catches or anything. What did kind of come to mind though while I was like working on this, at the time I was checking out JavaScript, and I had really only like worked with jQuery. Like I hadn't touched it in a long time, and I was like interested in like kind of coming up to speed on that side. And I was looking at a front end framework like React. And one of the things you'll notice if you go anywhere near a newbie tutorial for any of these frameworks is if you're a systems person anyways, you'll notice that templating is sort of built into JavaScript as sort of like a first-class citizen or like a core language feature, where it's with Python, it's a little bit more tacked on. There's a great module called cookiecutter that does this. But with JavaScript, you know, they've got this npm and init commands. They've got these great npx commands that come right out of the box, and they give developers really, really usable boilerplate that they can use right away to get things done. That's why the picture of the spaghetti's there. So like you get a functional test suite, you get like all this great stuff that allows you to start writing code faster. So like you've pushed that doorman who's blocking your way out of the, you know, you got him a little bit out of the way. But if you're working with something like TypeScript or a transpiled language, you've still got a lot of that stuff to set up, but there's templates to handle all of that. Python has all this templating too. Cookiecutter been around for a long time, and people have solved this sort of like standardization of repositories with this. And there's a number of valuable reasons why you might want to look into this, and we can talk about those briefly. But what I was sort of interested in was the CI portion of it, and how could I sort of leverage what like all these JavaScript devs were doing to get up and running faster? How could I leverage that from like a systems perspective to get up and running faster with all the pipeline stuff that I was sort of wrestling with? And when I looked around and started reading about this, actually there was a ton of people who were kind of converging on this as a solution for the reasons that we're going to get into in a second, I suppose. But this is what I sat down and did. I was like, I took my awful messy bash scripts and I was like, I'm going to template these. So if you've ever worked with Ansible, you already know cookiecutter. It uses the same templating engine under the hood. It's all going to be stuff you've already seen before. And in fact, actually, I'm going to show it to you just to kind of get you grounded here. I'll paste some links afterwards. This is the link for cookiecutter. If you've worked with Python at all, you're probably familiar with it. This is the actual template itself, and you'll notice it's got like these funny sort of brackety lines here. And if I dig in and look at something like more meaningful, like the Docker compose file, like if you've worked with Ansible, all this conditional stuff here would look very familiar to you. Also, I guess where it kind of got interesting for me was if I look here at this GitHub workflow, which is one of these pipelines as code documents. I do a little bit of simple templating at the top here where I inject some default values into the bash environment or the shell environment of this workflow. But everything below this is sort of standardized from that point in. So this portion here is not templated. It's just reusable because it's referred to by some environment variables. Pardon me, I want to make sure I'm looking at the right workflow here for you guys. But the interesting piece is that this is my CI now. It's a bunch of repeated commands that are run inside the dev environment that is instantiated by the template, and they're going to be consistent same commands, so that every repository that's created from this template will be able to invoke that same set of commands and get the same output. So, or get the same functionality, pardon me. So if you want to run your linter, you can run that. And this command would, it would be like YAML linting, shell check, you would pylint, all of that stuff running in batch on the code base. And they got some security tests here running things like Bandit or Git leaks or whatever you might be looking at. And then, yeah, so on and so forth with the unit tests and coverage and that kind of thing. My point with all of this, I guess, is just, and I'm going to instantiate, and hopefully you can see that shell terminal okay, and there's not something weird with that. But my point with all of this is that you get a lot of, if you pre-think, I guess, or sit down and look at all of this stuff ahead of time, you can sort of reap a lot of advantages for sort of setting up and sort of pre-allocating your initial pipelines, and all this stuff ahead of time. So I'm just populating some like default values to sort of create this template, and those will get rendered in when this is fired up. And spin this thing up. Just need a second to get going here. While it's doing that, I just wanted to sort of make the point that this is sort of possible because YAML is so syntactically simple, and it's also possible because I've replaced that CI portion of the pipeline with the development environment itself. I'm kind of using a piece or a functional piece that I'm like well acquainted with already, and it sort of lends itself to reuse there. So to interact with this thing, just jump inside the container and I'll make this font bigger for you. But like, again, I've just literally invoked this template, and I've got like, I don't know, working test suites, working coverage, other sort of sensible stuff that you wouldn't want people to be like messing around with too much, and when they've got something that they got to get done. But where it gets sort of, and there's a little bit of example code that's there just to like sort of give whoever's taking ownership of the template or repo the confidence that everything's working. But where it gets sort of interesting for me is when I take a look at the workflows that are actually generated by this. And there's a variety here. So depending on what you wanted to do, there's sort of like a generic push and you can build a wheel or a container or a release, and you can sort of mix and match what you want to do here with the templated workflows. And when you make your first commit and you push that to GitHub, then the payoff is there for kind of setting all this stuff up. And we can take a look at that in a second too. But the reason I'm kind of diving into the weeds here with this particular screen here is there's something I wanted to highlight, and that is the actual format of the commit messages themselves. And this is just like one example why you might want to standardize, like particularly if you're going to spin up a series of packages, why you might want to standardize on the tooling that you're using. So you notice that all these commits are sort of formatted in a certain way. That's because there's a tool called commitizen being used to do that. And if I jump over to the actual repository itself and take a look at some of the releases, there's tooling that can parse those and generate like change logs and that kind of stuff for you on demand. And I know that none of this is new, but the fact that I've templated the workflow and that I've kind of standardized how the commit messages are going to happen, and I've sort of put those sort of guardrails around the code base, someone can just sit down and they can start reaping sort of the rewards from that upfront work right away. Not to mention the actual like instantiated sort of workflow itself. Now, all of that sounds like probably like okay and nice, but the main selling thing for me when I was reading about this, and the reason why I chose to go to all this trouble, was the fact that let me make sure I clearly explain this, because it didn't dawn on me right away when I first looked at this. But here's the workflow. Here's the CI/CD for the template itself. So it does a couple of things at the beginning here. It builds a container. It runs all the commands, makes sure that the API is consistent and works. It does the same thing on the host machine. So if you were working on something that didn't fit into a container, you could put this in a VM and do it there. And then the third thing it does is it actually takes that initially populated template with the default values that I created, and it pushes it. And it pushes that so that it can do an automated test of the pipelines that it has just templated. So it's sort of a Russian doll thing where you're putting your pipeline in a CI/CD pipeline to make sure that your pipeline works. And given how much I hate pipeline testing, this was really cool to me. So here's the cookies repo, which is the default templated output of those silly values that I have by default in there. And when I take a look at its CI/CD, I see a number of automated tests that are happening, and this is simply just me validating all the time whenever I change the template that the template still works. So now when Jimmy developer comes along and wants to work on that new package, I can give him all that guardrail, all the code-based guardrails that we talked about, as well as a pipeline that I know works because I did an end-to-end test on it. Now, it's not the most robust testing in the world. I'm not testing like I'm not testing failure cases, which is really what you need to do to like really kind of summit your confidence in it. But I'd say that compared to what I normally would have done with something like this, I'm a lot more confident in it. And I guess again, none of this is me touting this particular solution as the be all end all, but I think there is something to be said for testing your pipelines, and templating is a really effective way of giving yourself the ability to actually ensure that the pipelines you're created work as expected. So all of that being said, like I did use this for a number of projects, more than one or two. It worked very effectively. Was able to get a lot of work done, and I was able to kind of get things started faster and in a more controlled way. But it was all written in Bash. Like all the underlying glue code was all Bash. I'm not an expert in bats. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Bash is not the easiest language to test. It's also, in my opinion, a little harder to maintain. It's a little brittle. Things break. It's over time. It's kind of hard to take care of, I think. So I was looking like for alternatives to writing a bunch of Bash code in a container for kind of pulling this thing off, particularly with the automation of the CI portion of stuff that people would be sort of working with all the time. So the first option that I kind of looked at was this build system called Pants that is built by the folks at Twitter, Foursquare, Square. It has some really, really neat parallelization features, and I can't kind of undersell this enough. Like if you have a large code base with a lot of like a really big Django project, or something to that extent that has like a lot of tests and a lot of files to lint, it has some really neat parallelization features, and it's really effective in this space. It's also rock solid tested code. you know, it wouldn't be a big deal to keep the same API, keep everything going like that. So I think this is a totally good solution to replace all that bash scripting with. I would just say the only kind of gray area with this is the way that Pants handles its dependencies. It's a little bit more proprietary. I'm sure there's a way to export it into the standard requirements.txt file that Python people like to use, so that you can use tools like, you know, PyUp, or if, you know, Dependabot, or whatever you're using to sort of manage your dependencies. I'm sure there's a way of standardizing it, but this idea of putting a build system, like a known manageable build system into the container made a lot of sense to me. The other kind of avenue I kind of explored was, okay, well, what if I just replace all the bash scripts with Python code that's tested? And at first I kind of was like, why would I want to reinvent the wheel with this? That seems silly. You know, like I've got a perfectly good build system over there. But the kind of neat thing about this, and I think this, again, I think this applies to any language. So I don't think that this is Python centric, but you could build a package in whatever language you're working with, and then incorporate all your dev dependencies in that package. So that you're kind of standard, again, you're like standardizing the dev environment, and you're, so if you're like in a platform role or something like that, you can hand over, not just a container with a bash CLI, but like a container with a managed group of dependencies that work together to form a cohesive dev environment. And that's kind of what I ended up doing was I liked this approach because I could, pardon me, I could manage my dependencies in a way that made them sort of like easy to upgrade. Like if I wanted to upgrade the container, I could just cut a new version of the package and then people could reinstall it. So it was really easy from that perspective. And then the other thing that kind of led me down this road was I wanted to, it's a template. So I want to make it as flexible as I can for the people who end up using it. And you can build a config file for a CLI or something like that. With a pre-existing build tool, you're going to be kind of at the mercy of whatever they've set up to sort of extend it. To me, I kind of wanted something where I could just flesh out a little bit more extra YAML and sort of configure it with that. And that's kind of what I did. So this package here, this thing called the pib CLI, groups all of these extra dependencies together into one bundle that you can kind of install in a container or on your host machine if you want to. And it's kind of like a dev environment in one shot kind of thing. So you install this thing and you get all these extra kind of helper processes, helper packages that help you get things done. And then it's got like a really simple config file as well that sort of comes pre-configured in a certain way for, I don't know, running some of these code formatting tools or whatever you're doing, but it's pretty easy to modify and change. So this made a lot of sense for me and seemed like a valid way to go. Yeah, like I'm still playing around with this stuff, but I think the major, I don't know, if there's anything to sort of take away here, I think the major thing is that if you are going to go to the trouble of templating your repository, templating your CI/CD, it sounds like a lot of work. Why would you want to do this, right? Well, I think the strongest reason for me was the end-to-end testing. So if I think about the way that I build pipelines now, I've had to troubleshoot so many of them that I often go to sort of like my repertoire of what I know works. And I frequently end up, when I'm cobbling together like a new pipeline for a project, I'm often going back to what I know, my repertoire of what I know works, and kind of taking pieces from that and cobbling together my new pipeline. And I was thinking about that and templating, and I was like, well, that's sort of like unprogrammatic templating. Like I think very few people would sit down and write a YAML document for a pipeline from scratch. Like I think you're copying and pasting most of the time from somewhere. And I think that lends itself obviously to, it has its pros and has its cons, but I think if you're going down that road, I think templating is sort of the natural, I think it's sort of the natural destination endpoint for that kind of thing. Like I think it makes a lot more sense. And particularly when you can invoke that template and do that end-to-end test, now the kind of time and effort that have been spent kind of seem like it's worth it to me now. And I can look forward to like greater sort of expediency on the next project that's using this, but I can also kind of relax and feel good that there's some good default guardrails in place on that new code base. So that was sort of the major payoff for me. I will also paste this PDF. I guess I'll put it in the Slack chat. These are a bunch of like articles and tools. The two at the top there, cookiecutter and Yeoman. Those are basically the same thing. One's in JavaScript, one's in Python. They're just templating engines. But there's some other articles in here that are people kind of wrestling with the same thing and thinking about the same thing. Like, why don't I template my CI/CD, and how can I better test my CI/CD? And actually, that is again, I got to go back to that slide that Adam Bell kind of put up with the 100 commits of somebody troubleshooting the pipeline. I just don't want to be that person again, ever. That's like a special kind of hell, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Yeah, so like any way that you can sort of automate and build confidence in the pipelines that you're putting together in these YAML documents, any way you can pull that off, I think is a good thing. And I think probably I'm only kind of scratching. I'm sure I'm only scratching the surface of what's possible with this. Like I would love to come back and watch a talk by one of you about how you came up with a system for testing your pipeline. Like that would be unbelievably useful for me. I would love to see that. And I'm hoping in some small way that some of the stuff that I kind of dug up here and put together in the talk might lend itself to inspiring some of you guys to do something like that. If you're at all interested in the project I was sort of demoing here that kind of does this stuff, I'm happy to share the links for that as well. It'll be in the PDF that I post in Slack. I'm also happy to answer any questions, but I think the main thing I sort of just wanted to get across was just how much I hate testing pipelines and the lengths that I'm willing to go to avoid it. But all in all, the upfront effort that went into creating the template, I would say was definitely paid off. Sort of definitely paid for itself in the sort of time I saved with like again getting past the doorman and getting in to be able to make that first commit. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. No, that was great. I definitely agree with you. I think it's something that you probably don't encounter early on, but after a while you realize, hey, I keep wasting time in this area, and if I could just step back for a second and think about the things that I need, I'd probably have a much easier time. And one thing that always comes up to me over and over again is this idea of beginning with the end in mind, right? And so like, and having clarity on your destination and what you really want to achieve. So I think that templating is a super easy way of just like laying that out really early on and saying, this is the rough abstract of what I want to do. That kind of clarity can really help you avoid a bunch of problems down the road. And then, it's something that you can share really early with people too. And because a lot of this stuff, we're not working alone either. So having something to share with people and say, here's here's the rough outline, here's the template, here's the structure of what I'm proposing, and then going from there rather than the kind of incremental one piece at a time, and it doesn't really do anything, or you can't really see value until you get to a certain point. It makes a lot of sense to start from like a clear vision of, here's the rough structure of what we want to do, and see that kind of like day one payoff, I think is super valuable, especially because people want to see progress, whether it's themselves or other people in the team, right? They want to know what you're working on, where it is, how it's going. So being able to show that workflow is like in place from day one, even if it's very simple, gives you that immediate progress demonstration that I think keeps us going and keeps other people from wondering like, what is going on with this thing, right?
Everything you said is obviously very true. I just want to mention this about templates because having worked with a number of them, you want to be careful that you don't make things too restrictive so that somebody can't kind of use it and grow and sort of expand it to what they really need. But at the same time, like commits are not a way to effectively end-to-end test if things are functional. So providing a team or a person with a sort of like a battle-tested section of pipeline that they can sort of cobble together into something bigger or kind of stretch to their needs. There's, in my own experience, there's immense value in that.
Definitely. Anybody else have any questions for Niall on this or pipelines in general?
Yeah, I do. I can put in a chat if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's up to you. You could say, you can jump it in now.
No problem.
Is this specific to Circle?
Well, in CI/CD in general, because I was using Circle, but I also saw some other versions of CI/CD. And what I noticed is that it will like show you like whether the commit succeed or failed. And I was wondering about the process about that. I was wondering that if I want to like analyze the code, do I actually go into the CI/CD to download the code, or do I go into the actual source code repository, do the download, then analyze the code from there? That's what I normally do, but I was wondering if this is the right way as well. I was just wondering your take on it.
Oh, that's interesting. So
you
your
want to
workflow is
troubleshoot the execute.
Yeah, go ahead now.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of doing. Like, what is the right way? Would it be to actually go into the source code repository, download the code and analyze the code, or do I have to go into the CI/CD, download the code from there, then analyze it? Because I know the CI/CD will tell me, whether it succeed or fail, right? And it'll tell me what's running, what's being processed and stuff like that. But I was just wondering, that's all. Because I normally just go into the source code repository and analyze where the code went wrong, things of that nature. So I was wondering if I'm doing it the right way. Just an opinion, that's it.
I'm not going to tout myself as an expert on pipeline troubleshooting per se, but I know
that's what
a
you
few
do
of these
too, right?
platforms allow you. Few of these platforms allow you to actually like interact with the execution environment after a failure, so you can like kind of dive in and see what's up.
Okay.
That's the piece I was thinking about too, because like the thing that's missing in the local environment is that you might have a different environment, right, in your CI/CD, wherever your CI/CD pipeline's running, and so that's pretty common to actually have something where locally it's working totally fine, and you upload it, and where it's running, Circle or otherwise, there's some environmental challenge there, and so you'd have to check the logs. But in some cases, you can actually get at those logs locally, right? You can pull them from like your command line, so that that can help with the workflow.
Okay. All right. Okay. As long as I'm on the right track, because I was wondering about it. But thanks, guys. That's all I really need to know. Thank you so much.
Cool. Anybody else have any other questions?
I have a question. If no one else.
Yeah, no problem. Go.
Right, thank you. Hi, my name is Mehdi. Thank you for sharing. This was super insightful. My question is, say you have a template that folks are using to generate their project and get started with their new systems and services. And fast forward a couple of months into the future, and you come up across a requirement that, or like you have a requirement that where you have to change the template, but at the same time, you want this change to propagate to everyone who has used this the template at this point. Have you come across this situation? And is there anything that comes to mind that may address it?
I think it's a cool problem. When I was kind of tinkering around with this and reading some of the material that's on that list, it's something that came up. It was why I opted to put the like sort of collection of packages together so that I could sort of upgrade what was being distributed to the dev environment. But in terms of like the template itself, the only thing I was thinking of, and I think this is not a problem that I solved, but it was something I was thinking about. It was like some kind of modular way to be able to re-template the particular workflows that you need would be kind of cool. I don't like. There's a lot of obviously there's a lot of different ways of like pulling off templating like that. I'm using a simple CLI tool, but there's, you know, you could go further and put this stuff in a service like I believe Console has a templating feature, and there's a number of other ways to do this sort of like more programmatically. But you could template this stuff and distribute it, I guess, if you wanted to be like more fancy, or even use a tool like Ansible to like run back over a repository and re-template a file in place. But the problem becomes like, how do you keep all your stuff flexible so that you can extend it, or be able to add like new features and new steps to the pipeline, while being able to sort of update it. I think like the two forces are sort of like at odds with each other, if you kind of follow me there, because if you deviate from the template, it's hard, you can't just retemplate it anymore. So it's, I don't know, like there's, I think this is like a space definitely where this like can be improved for sure. It's kind of a cool problem.
Thanks.
Is this something where, I mean, I imagine that all of this gets version controlled within your regular version control, right? So you could branch. So if you've got templating, you can have a branch that's not trunk, or you can have releases where there's like a known good, and then teams could have, you know, they could be issuing pull requests for customizations, or they could be instantiating and like, or forking, right? And then making their own customizations and then rebase off of the master.
I think all of those are valid. The approach that I was kind of that I sort of favored myself for that sort of like feature variety was just to like create a bunch of different like a myriad of like templates that are available and kind of just template them all, and then let folks kind of pick what they wanted, with my reasoning being like, I've gone to the trouble of like end-to-end testing all of these. I know that they work. So here's a bunch of options for stuff that we've done. And I don't know, I'm sort of the mind that it might be kind of cool to allow people to like, you know, submit a PR to whatever the platform team or ops team's template repo is, and create like a new variation that would get periodically tested and like kind of expand what's available that way. Again, as soon as you start adding to it, though, you're going to deviate from the template and you get right back into the insightful problem that was just brought up.
Yeah, I think it's really cool though that you can leverage, you know, all the typical coding patterns. Like you don't necessarily introduce new problems that regular code doesn't have, because this is like, you know, it's all infrastructure as code. I mean, pipelines as code, but I think you can sort of leverage all those best practices from like writing code and teams that will help deal with all these things, and so that you're not like solving brand new problems necessarily. And I like that a lot. Anybody else have any questions?
I do have one thing. Is this set up on a Jenkins? Like, is this whole thing set up on a Jenkins and then tried out anytime?
So the content that I was the content that I've been playing around with here to sort of demo for you was done with definitions for GitHub Actions, which is an alternative pipeline system that's sort of baked into GitHub, but the same principles would apply. And in fact, if you hunt around for Jenkins workflow templates or Jenkins CI/CD templates, you'll find a number of people have been like kind of picking around and kicking the tires on that. There's actually a fair bit of stuff out there.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? We got probably time for one more question before we break at 6.
I think again, like not to overstate the obvious, but just like that ability to be able to like test the pipelines that you're putting together, especially like when you catch yourself like kind of building the same style of like, oh man, like another pipeline that does, you know, X, Y, and Z followed by, you know, A, B, and C. Like, I don't know. For me personally, that was just like an alarm bell that like there's probably something I could do more efficiently here to like kind of streamline things. And then, you know, that ability to like actually test what you're putting together before anybody, before any like valuable code is running through it. That's just really nice to have.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, as we move to things like platform teams and enabling teams, trying to build that kind of like easy on-ramp for teams where the right way is the easy way. Things like this really allow you to sort of build out this product portfolio from an ops perspective that let the teams kind of self-serve to an extent by leveraging like the, you know, the best of what the organization has to offer, and then or just, you know, one of the options that the organization has to offer, and allow them to kind of like take something that is giving you batteries included solution to get started, because, you know, you may not have a strong opinion about any of these things, especially when you're starting out or when you're starting a new project, but you want to start on the right foot. I think it's really valuable because, you know, when we look at the portfolio that these teams need to provide organizations, like there's a lot of stuff, right? And if the answer is just pick something open source or pick something off the shelf or use a SaaS, you know, you're really not doing that much of a service. But by providing something that's flexible and giving you a head start, that is a way to focus on, you know, what we really need to do, which is like deliver value to customers, right? So the more time we spend fumbling around on all this stuff is like, it's not making us look good. It's not making the company look good. It's not really providing much value. So I think it's pretty awesome. With that, I'm just going to share my screen real quick just to give everybody, in case you joined. Once again, thanks, Niall. This was an excellent presentation. I really appreciate it. Next month, we have Andrew, so feel free to join us or RSVP for that. You'll get all the heads up. We will be posting in Slack just to give everybody notice and let you know that the next event's coming up. But same time, first Tuesday of the month. barring weird vacation stuff. But hope to see everybody there. Thank you for joining us for January, and all the best in 2021. See you folks soon.